What is up, everybody? Thank you for joining us today. You see, we got Matt here. We're going to talk about Nobelium today, and we also have a special guest who's able to make it. So, you all know him as Ryan Cromar. So, welcome, Ryan. Thanks for joining us on the stream. And I see you picked a creative display name for the event.
Well,
So the chicken
I,
wing
I was
connoisseur.
lacking the multiple acronyms such as yourselves, so I figured what's second best but food.
What you have to do next time is just anachronize that into CWC so that nobody knows what that is, right? Like Ryan Cromar, CWC. What is that? Chicken wing connoisseur. Love them. Fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Wesley. It's great to see you. Well, today we're going to talk about Nobelium, and it's something that has come up for the last week or two from Microsoft.
Now, Dom, are
right?
you sure you don't mean Noble Baron, Dark Halo, Stellar Particle, UNC 2452, Yttrium, the Duke's Cozy Bear, or Cozy Duke?
Well,
AKA?
semantics, right?
Fair.
So Microsoft loves to name threat actors, and they love to use the old periodic table there. So these guys are Nobelium, and what Nobelium is, just to set things straight, is it's not a hack, it's not a vulnerability, it's a group of people, right?
Right.
So there's an alleged sponsorship that we're not really going to go into, but they're also alleged to be the ones behind the SolarWinds incidents, right? So they're known for supply chain attacks. So just to lay this out, Microsoft is saying, hey guys, we've been tracking this group of threat actors, right? And their latest trick seems to be going after the IT supply chain, which I guess they were doing before, but they're really going after it in a somewhat of a broader market and really sort of a smaller audience or smaller target, right? They're attacking resellers, right? Which is probably everyone who's coming to the stream. So, and us, right? Us at PAX 8. So,
yeah.
Today we're just going to talk about, what it means and some ways to protect yourself. And then if you guys have any questions, drop them in the chat or the comments, and we'll get them answered for you. So Matt, you've been on this as well. What is sort of the key thing we all need to be doing here?
Well, I mean, I think what Microsoft came out October 25th and said from their blog, hey, here's some advanced TTPs or techniques, tactics, and practices that are being used by threat actor APT29 or all the names that I mentioned earlier. But what they're really saying is, hey, they're starting to go after with some basically sophisticated spear phishing attacks. They're starting to go after tokens of CSP, PAX 8, or a lot of MSPs out there that are CSPs as well as MSPs and practitioners themselves, right? So essentially what this comes down to is they're wanting to steal your identity. If anybody's ever seen my Evil Jinx 2 attack, that's a methodology, but they're wanting to socially engineer their way into your organizations and then take advantage of your trusted relationship down through the orgs to the others. Right? Most people that are aware of Partner Center are aware of how they have this trusted delegated administration permission, or DAP, from Microsoft that gives the ability to do certain things. We have the same. And what these threat actors are doing is through various techniques, they're getting access to that tenancy of that Azure Active Directory tenant through either spear phishing or spear phishing with enterprise apps. I've also done another video on that before, but enterprise app, persistence methodologies. But short story is you really need to limit the damage or the blast radius, as well as make it harder for the threat actor to use those spear phishing techniques against you. Right? They really don't want to be in the business of doing it from your machine constantly. With the cloud, they'd much rather have a much longer persistence direct to the cloud that they can do themselves, without necessarily having to stay involved with you as the practitioner or us as the CSP. So there's my short kind of intro into what the risk is that they are basically attacking through looking up that you like Starbucks and sending you a free Starbucks, or, right, spear phishing techniques meant to attack just the DOM or just the MAT, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they really knew me, though, they wouldn't be sending Starbucks. It would be Wingstop, Buffalo Wild Wings, the Key.
Is that from your designated CWC from earlier? Yes.
I mean, that's sophisticated social engineering at its finest, right?
For sure.
Well, it's not hard nowadays, and that's what we really need to be aware of. Is you've got stuff on LinkedIn, you might post stuff to other social media. It's not hard to gather information on people, and I think if what Microsoft is alleging as far as who these guys are, it's very much not difficult for them, right? It's very easy for them. So it's not hard to figure out that, Cromar, you like wings, and Matt, likes
I like
IPAs,
letters, apparently, and
start,
IPAs for sure.
and start sending, things that are going to get your attention. And that's what spear phishing really is something that's fine tuned to the person, and it's well worth it. Even a small MSP, right? It's so you have 10 customers. Those are 10 small businesses that I can exfiltrate data out of. I can dump data, create arbitrary administrative accounts that are likely to get missed and have long-term access. You can do an e-discovery and just dump everything, right? Like, it's just not hard to do this. So, Cromar, you're out on the ground, and I know you and I have been chatting about this a little bit, but what word are you hearing sort of from the community and internally at the company?
It's definitely a hot topic, and I mean, coming from the Microsoft team, we saw the Microsoft blog post back in July of this, and kind of knew it was coming. And I think we saw, what was it, TD Synex in their announcement of the encounter that they had as well. So it's kind of been growing and growing, and what we're hearing from partners is that they won't name names. They've experienced some of the attempts for the last few months, just to kind of feelers out there kind of thing. And we're hearing that feedback from partners that's been going on for a hot minute here, and now we're seeing the kind of end of that. Well, not end of that, but the what's that turned into. And it's just absolutely incredible to know, like, man, this is not something that's just hitting the big guys. This is something that's very close to home for us at PAX 8. So kudos to you two for putting this together and bringing me on today.
I'll add something out of what you said that's kind of nice, is that we actually are seeing the sophistication of partners grow, right? We're seeing people actually see the hammers against their fence, if you will, right? In the past, how many times did you know people were hitting 3389? What, after you had a compromise, right? Like, and I think the one thing I want to talk about is that we are starting to see people say, yeah, I'm seeing this attack, or I just saw this type of spear phishing, or I just saw this type of persistence technique, or someone tried to harvest this token. And, that means we're seeing an escalated capability of detection, right? If you look at Microsoft's article on this, 80% of it was focused on detection. Right, it was on reviewing logs and reviewing this and checking for enterprise apps and seeing if you have any artifact for these YAML rules. And right, so you're starting to see kind of this kind of stuff play out. We're sophisticating MSP. Dom, you and I wanted to kind of try to talk about. Oh, frozen. Nope, back. How much did y'all lose me?
But I'm good. You blip for like 1 second. You're good.
Oh, it's free.
Oh, wait a minute.
Hey, fair enough. One of the things we wanted to talk about was
Matt's in a hotel in Canada.
How can we
on that
protect
fancy
ourselves?
hotel Wi-Fi? So
it's that Bell Canada internet.
Hey, and now I'm getting 3 milliseconds again, though. It's between 3 and 900 milliseconds, unfortunately. We wanted to talk about how we can protect ourselves, right? And let's talk about some of these components when you're thinking about Azure. And I'm going to get a little technical, but maybe not massively, right? Azure is based on OAuth, or OpenIDC Connect. Right, and so OAuth is a session token, essentially. And so one of the things that the threat actor wants to do is gain access to that token and replay that token in a way that they stay you during your refresh timeline. Right, so one of the things that we can do to protect ourselves, and I would say we should, is in your conditional access policies, set session lifetime expirations that are short. Right, say that they're not persistent. Those are all in the same setting. And set a very short timeline and a non-persistent timeline, meaning that if I grab that, it's only good for an hour or 2 hours, and it's also potentially maybe not good if it leaves this machine, right? Or this browser session, depending on what you're doing. So, Dom, any thoughts on that, or have you? I know we did that at Iconic several years ago, or a year ago.
Yeah, we absolutely did short life sessions, right? And it doesn't create much of a user burden if you're using Azure AD joined devices that are Intune managed. That SSO experience just re-authenticates you with that trusted credential on the TPM. So it's really not an end user impact. The other honest piece of advice I'd give is anyone who has access to Partner Center, and unfortunately at this particular point in time, I can't like pick out Partner Center in a CA policy. I wish I could. I hope that's an evolution we see. But you need to be on an Intune trusted device, or you're just not getting in, right? Like if you're not on a corporate device, sorry, not sorry.
Oh my gosh.
That's why we issue laptops and not desktops, right? You should have it with you. And that's huge because now, even if I get that session, it's no good on my not into trust device, right? It's not going to get me into what I want to get into. Now, Microsoft made an announcement in the October 2021 updates. So we have to be real careful because I think some of us know more than is public. But I'm going to try this little feature.
GDAPs.
Yes, I'm going to try this little feature in Restream. I don't know how far out this comment is going to make it, but I did post a link through Restream. Matt, you might need to repost it as you, so it goes to your channels. But this is a Microsoft Partner Center announcement. Yeah, there's no point showing that. It's a long link. But there's a technology
Just type
called
it in
GDAP
one character at a time. We'll wait.
And GDAP
it's
is go ahead. These internet things are fun, man. GDAP is DAP, but it's granular, right? So we're able to say, hey, you can do this, but not that. And there's a lot to it. And again, what's in the article? I'm pointing at my screen like you can see it, but what's in the article is really, I guess, what we could talk about. But it's very cool. It adds layers to Partner Center that I think most of you who would be attending the stream and a lot of you in the community are really wanting is the ability to control what can be done in Partner Center. So it's the next evolution of sort of how we handle delegated admin privileges. Microsoft also released some guidance, and PAX 8 also, we sent out some information. So if you're a Microsoft buying PAX 8 partner, you should have received an email from us. Look for PAX 8 alerts. Check your spam. It does come from the marketing tool. Sorry. But it kind of lays out some things we do at PAX 8 to protect you guys and by extension your customers and of course ourselves. Can't go over in this live stream, but it has very valuable information for you in there to understand that PAX 8 has a lot of control in place around Partner Center and some of these leaky systems, if you will. But I think the notion of the story is protect yourself, right? I think you're going to see more sophisticated attacks aimed at your staff that are that spear phishing, that I understand what you're into and what your hobbies are, or I understand like what your pain points are. I'm going to hit on those if I'm going to try to attack you. And I'm also going to try, like what Matt was mentioning, with Evil Gen X attacks and stealing tokens and not having to steal the password. So I think baselines apply. MFA, like you have to if you're in Partner Center, right? Yeah. That's Microsoft's bare minimum. But look at these other protections. Think about implementing technologies like Endpoint Manager. And then that leads us into Azure AD Premium. So before we jump into PAM, I do want to mention Microsoft is offering, I believe it's 2 years.
I think it's 2 years.
Mixed documentation, but I believe it's 2 years. Is it 2 years, Cromar, of Azure AD Premium P2, and that unlocks a feature called Privileged Access Management, which you should center your life around when it comes to this kind of stuff. So, Matt, can you talk us through PAM real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to touch real quickly also on GDAPs, at least one more piece about it, in the sense that what we also want to try to do in every way with your clients is limit blast radius. By that I mean, if you have the ability to stop how many of your clients get impacted by any one of your users being compromised, that's a very defensible strategy, right? So if you think of what spear phishing is trying to do is I want to steal the chicken wing connoisseur's credentials, and then I want to use Ryan Cromar's credentials to have access to anything Ryan Cromar has access to. If that means that Ryan Cromar has access to every single client, then I am in absolute field day situation. I'm very happy as a threat actor. If I only get the 4 clients Ryan Cromar is supposed to be touching right now, it's a lot easier. And so what GDAP should help automate is that type of process through dynamic groups, automation through that methodology to allow access to groups. But in the interim, right, so that when we can't limit our blast radius in the form of Partner Center, right? Partner Center is monolithic. If I'm in, I have access to all clients, just the way it works. We can use PAM. And what PAM essentially does in Microsoft's model is allows you to not be an administrator at all times, meaning my token may not grant me access to do anything in Partner Center. I may have to request escalation of that token. And I don't want to get into the details of how this is structured. Dom and I have done this and shown the way to do it, and Dom may already have a video for it here. But what we're talking about is I would request Dom, I need access to the Chicken Wing Connoisseurs Hall of Fame account that I manage. And I'm going to say, hey, listen, I don't have access to Partner Center, but I need it. Dom, please allow me access. Dom can check not only the request, but also some physical process. He could say, listen, is Matt actually an assigned account rep for that company? If not, I'm not even going to allow this escalation. right? You could put contextual stuff inside that request to say, human-wise, something a threat actor wouldn't be able to see. They wouldn't see those processes. They wouldn't necessarily have access to those systems. And so it allows you to create out-of-band concepts to make it to where the threat actor not only has to shoot me, he has to shoot me while I'm holding the baton, right? And so it now becomes a much harder endeavor to do to gain access. And then it's certainly non-persistent. They have timelines. So they have this expiration or drop dead time, and then that expires. And so PAM is a beautiful way. It used to, you'd have to buy a P2 license. Right now, I think Microsoft is making a great service to the community by giving the P2 license for either 1 or 2 years. I think it is 2. And if so, using that and allowing the PAM might create a 5-minute frustration to wait for Dom to approve my request. But boy, when I stand in front of my client and say, what did you do to protect me? I have much better answers to say. I didn't even give myself admin all the time. I took it away unless I really needed it. And that comes into principle of least privilege, right? In the sense that now we're being POL time slices, right? So now is my privilege even needed in that interim when I'm sleeping? Maybe not, right? So that's kind of my quick on PAM. And you know, we're going to try to get some video content on how to use it and some instructions. We've done it a few times. But yeah, PAM is a very effective method in the interim until GDAPs. And even with GDAPs, I would probably say escalatory PAM is a good idea. So...
yeah. Well, it all comes down to persistence, right? Like if I have a key to your house, I always have a key to your house. If I use some kind of access control mechanism, right, where you don't have to change the locks to lock me out, it's a much better mechanism, right? Because I can go in and say Chromar's not allowed anymore, or Matt's not allowed anymore. So it's very similar to that, in that you need to ask. And there's a lot of operational opportunity there too, right? You need to actually go look at the ticket number they put in and make sure that there's a reason for them to need admin access, right? Don't just, it comes back to blindly approving MFA on my phone, right? You don't want to do that. You need to make sure, did I try to sign in? Did I want to do that? And maybe like if it's sensitive enough, or depending on your client base or your level of concern, I'm going to text Chromar and be like, hey man, did you ask for elevation? And yes, you know, SMS is not secure, but it's a good way to get in touch quick. Or something to that effect, right? Shoot them a Teams message. There's even some cool things you can do with Power Automate to push up the approvals through Teams and make it a little cleaner. So but
I would also say, Dom, that text messages in that context, if you think about it, think like a threat actor who's going in blind. They've gathered some information, they've enumerated for a while, but they're not going to know that out of band, Dom's going to grab a cell phone number for Ryan Cromar and be prepared to text that message to him in 30. That's not one of those things that's really easy unless you're a very concerted threat actor with a lot of time watching both physically and virtually. And I think so what I'm getting at is, even though those things are considered less secure, it's kind of like that when you stack two 75% solutions together, they're a 90% solution. Right, in the sense that they kind of add to each other in this additive method. So I wouldn't say dissuade yourself from doing that, and don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Right, adding extra layers and adding more layers later is still valuable. But good point on SMS in general. I just kind of wanted to take this
and also,
minute
like,
to do a thought exercise on that.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
Cromar and I talk all the time. Yep. So if he sends me a text back that's like totally grammatically wrong and misspelled and like not Canadian seeming, I'm gonna be like, hey man, wait a minute.
Tom's like, there's no cat pictures or anything ridiculous in here. Like, Chromar uses regular language. What? So that's so true. Those bad actors, they got to be on top of their game, man. They got to be sending the dog pictures and those bad requests at the same time.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Well, it doesn't look like we're gonna get a lot of questions, so we might go ahead and wrap this up. But
hey,
again,
Alan Miller just popped in a comment.
Oh, he did. Look at that. Perfect timing, Alan.
Alan is 100% accurate, right?
Yeah.
And whether it's nation state or even otherwise motivated and capable threat actor, you know, and I think one of the things that I take out of that, Alan, is one, not to be paranoid as an MSP, but if I was being a bad guy, if I decided I was going to take my skills and go on the other side of the fence and start playing ball over there, I guarantee you I would find an MSP. I would look at revenue streams. I would look at their size. I'd hear about them in the channel. I'd see their information, and I'd say, time to start digging on these humans, right? And I would definitely do that. I mean, we think nation state, but when you start thinking of a, you know, $20 million or $40 million return, you start getting into a much different conversation. And unlike
or
these
intelligence,
unlike these monolithic corporations that I might get one ransom from, I'm going to get 400 ransoms from going after a large MSP. I'm going to have separate ransoms from each of them, and I might not negotiate that as some master level event, right? And I think you start getting into a situation where both from a ransom as well as, the extortion aspects of this, like we can't afford not to think like that, even if that means that you're doing these processes and doing things that feel like you're going overboard. I would argue that it's in your defensibility to say we at least take ourselves more serious than, yeah, am I a bad guy? No, you're my buddy. But yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, anyways, the point is that, we do need to think paranoid like that, as if you were being targeted. That's why they call it spear phishing in these. They are looking at your information and attacking in that way. It wouldn't be all that far-fetched to start looking at operational back processes as well before I move forward. So.
Well, and your phone number is still on the internet, right? For like a tiny fraction of a Bitcoin, right? So it's important to understand these things. And that's why I said, like, from the context of the conversation I have with Matt or the context of the conversation I have with Cromar, I know if I'm talking to one of you guys, right? Like, and all joking aside, like, I'm going to know. So these things to pay attention for, right? And then if I'm weirded out, I'm going to call you. And if you don't sound like Cromar, then we know we have an issue. So it's just building those layers of defense. But I will say, like, if you have an actual intelligence agency targeting you from a developed country, you lose. That's it, period. And that's why we talk about defensibility, right? I am more than comfortable standing in a courtroom and saying, we were targeted by insert intelligence agency here.
Right.
I don't know what you wanted me to do about it. Like, they were going to win.
But moreover, here's all the actions I took knowing that might be an outcome. Here's what I documented as I improved. Here's where I started at a 3, got to a 4, got to a 5, got to a 7, got to a 9, right? Those are the reality of that. So I think that, defensibility is probably the biggest action here. And actually reviewing what I loved about this Nobelium kind of release, which was great because our security team inside took that and went back and re-guided what things they were doing, what things they could do better. And, we saw a couple of improvement pieces, but this was the 12th time they've talked about this, right? Like this is kind of, part of their world. And I guess the biggest point is that as MSPs, we have to actually start thinking we should be very much in tune with these conversations, right? Yeah, that's a great point, Alan. If I get into an MSP, I'd probably figure out how to leverage it in a separate infection vector into smaller clients first. Certainly would use it to gain footholds, to gain access, to try to find out where my detection mechanisms were going to come from, right? If you looked at, I think it was Nobelium where they're talking about this, that you have, separate roles, right? You have the first pin person, you have the persistence person, and you then have the follow-up of enumeration and lateralization person. And so you start seeing, that kind of stuff. And, yeah, absolutely. So one of the things about that, Alan, it's in our document. I don't want to touch on it operationally right now, just from the risk of saying it out loud on his last comment, saying, we've been adding lots of vendors. They're very enclaved. There's not a whole lot of crossover enumeration capable there. But yeah, short story is definitely they would start getting those things that would not get detected first, so that they can gather all of the revenue. At the
if you've seen a heist movie, right, like.
Right.
We'll take Ocean's 11.
Yeah. It's perfect.
Like, I'm going to trip the alarm, right? I'm going to do what I can and trip the alarm. And then I'm going to go away for a minute until everyone calms down. And I know what I can do. So if you get a tripped alarm, it's your job to take it up a notch. Like, how far did they get before I got a ding? And I need to make that ding happen sooner every single time. And that's what we talk about when we talk about iterative security. I need to find the bad guy a little bit sooner every time. And then when I do get an alarm, I need to pay attention to that specific vector. Like, what led up to that vector? Yeah. I need to pay attention to that.
Which means you have to be gathering that.
Right.
Which means you have to have it. Which means you have to be willing. Like, this goes into some of this fundamental DNA of what you and I are teaching in the CIS controls class, right? These are all table stakes to be able to continue.
It sounds like it's just being proactive, right? Like, the last thing you want to do is end up with George Clooney building a model of like what you've got going on, and
Right.
Like, it goes back to defensibility and being proactive with that defensibility, right? 100%. Like, here's everything that I could possibly do. And to Dom's point, insert secret agency that's going to go after you. Like, there's nothing you can do about it, but you have to be able to say, I did all these things. Like, that's, 100%. Love it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stop even from the perspective of getting someone hired ultimately, right? When you start looking at some of these nation state players, it's not all that far-fetched to get people hired. Or if you look at DarkSide, they put out an ad that said, hey, listen, $1 million for any MSP employee that wants to hand over MSP credentials. It's very hard to defend against someone that has now become poisoned as an individual. And I think that's why you have to make such an argument for reducing the blast radius and understanding that it is going to happen, right? I like to use the term live compromised. All I mean by live compromised is understand that it's going to happen, start focusing on it as if it already has, and try to see where you can reduce that damage and reduce that blast radius, right? There's a reason soldiers wear shrapnel preventing vests. It's not that it'll stop everything, but it does stop some of the blast radius, if you will, right? It does make it to where some particles aren't flying fast enough afterwards. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's the key, right? And I think it's at some point you sort of need to understand at a certain level that you're going to get hit. Right. And I think that's very hard for folks who haven't been as deep into cyber, is that it's a losing game, right?
Yeah.
You want to win as much as you can. And like you like to say, it's like football, right? But you're going to take a hit. The goal is to take the smallest hit possible. That's why we have safety
not lose
football,
2 blocks
right?
of 10 yards or
Exactly.
4 blocks of 10 yards, right? Let's hold her down to 1 block of 10 yards.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, we see these huge breaches and data leaks. It's because nothing was segmented. Right, like if I stored all my crap in an S3 bucket, and then I put it all in one spot, I only have to make one mistake, and all the IP or whatever was in there, the personal information, is compromised. If I had broken that up and maybe made the underlying application a little less monolithic, that would have been a factor of limiting blast radius. Right, so you could scale that down, and you could even do this at the customer level and say, no, Mr. CEO, you don't need access to everything, and go into these conversations like that, which can be really hard to do, right?
Yeah.
It took me a hot minute to be able to be like, no, I know you're the owner of the company, you're the guy they want, right? But once you can explain that and make them understand, he doesn't necessarily need access, he or she doesn't need access to everything all the time, right? If they're not involved in, say, accounting because they have an accounting team, why are they in the finance share, right? They can ask the CFO for a report. And that's really what we're getting at, is you need to limit privilege at your level to really protect yourself or defend yourself somewhat against something like Nobelium. So it's a vigilance, right? And I would say, I guess what I can share, or I feel comfortable sharing here, is that we part of what we said in our communication is, hey, we always do defense in depth, right? We do a lot of things at PAX 8 from a security perspective. When something like this happens, it absolutely ratchets it up a little bit. That's not to say we don't have a strong baseline, but that's to say, okay, TTPs have been put out, indicators of compromise have been put out, whatever information has been put out. We are absolutely going to monitor for that specifically in addition to what we're doing. That's the whole point of this information being released.
And rethink some of the things we're doing. I mean, that's what I love about being involved in this, is that there is a lot of that discussion to say, let's just reimagine. Let's keep adding. Let's add layers.
Yeah. And there's a huge internal email thread. It's like, hey, we got to look at this, and there's tiger teams being formed across the company of expertise. So you need to do the same thing, reach out and understand. And the cool thing about the community is you all can help each other, right? And we're here to facilitate that. So we definitely, encourage you to talk to each other about what you're seeing. A good friend of ours, we were in an advisory council meeting, and they said, hey, like a couple months ago, an employee of ours got phished, and they managed to get in. And they went straight for Partner Center. They didn't touch anything, right? And he's like, I think that's probably them. And I was, you're probably right. So here's the thing: is there's no secret. Like MSPs or Microsoft CSPs, we all use Partner Center, right? So there's no secret sauce here. Everybody knows exactly what to attack, right? That threat actor has it bookmarked. It's like account straight to Partner Center because he needs to do it quick. So you've got to think about these things very proactively, and then pivot every time something like this happens.
The other thing I wanted to talk about is the least defensible decision you can make. And when we talk about defensibility, I'm really talking about the reasonable person rule, right? And so, in cyber, there's been a long-standing conversation. I don't think it applies as much to privacy, because if you lose the data, you lost the data. But in the reasonable person rule is, would a reasonable person look at your actions and think that you did the right things to protect your constituency, right, and to protect your fiduciary responsibility for your clients? That's kind of the reasonable person rule. And so when we talk defensibility, I'm really talking about being able to defend yourself in court based on your actions, less so about how you protected something, right? And so I think the least defensible action is still having DAP for a client that you no longer have under agreement nor need to have access to. So if I could take anything out of this 30-minute conversation and say, go look at this, go look at your delegated administration permissions in Partner Center, and if you still have a client that has no connection to you, that still has full admin access, that is not defensible in any way. You maintained access after you had no more right to access that. And legally, you may not have the protections that you had under an active agreement, right? And so that's probably what I could take as the biggest defensibility advice today.
And I was absolutely guilty of that. Like I've absolutely lost customers, and then been doing something else at Partner Center. Maybe it was another A customer, and I was like, oh crap. It's a very easy thing to miss, and it comes back to understanding what your footprint is and having SOPs around it. And the chances of the next MSP, this is something we did, and I'm not trying to toot my horn, but it was part of our checklist, is who else is a partner on this tenant, and do they need to be removed? It was part of our checklist in my company, so it's you sort of need to do it too when you bring on a customer. You really need to do it when you lose a customer, when a customer goes elsewhere. Is you've got to remove that access.
Because imagine that conversation. Okay, we got compromised. How did we get compromised? My MSP from 2 years ago. Oh, I'm suing. Right? And you're not going to win. It's a much different conversation. Yeah.
I forgot this guy's name, but it was
was it Bob?
Another point is our same friend and the same friend we were talking about that had the incident also mentioned, they have some co-managed clients. They don't have DAP in there because they don't need admin access. They don't access it. They sell them licenses, and then when they need to get DAP, they get DAP for whatever they're helping with, and then they remove it, right? And I think it goes without saying, we've already put the writing on the wall here. If you want to remove PAX 8 as a delegated admin, you have the option, or any other indirect provider. Doesn't limit our ability to provide support, absolutely, but we don't need that access all the time, right? I'm just being totally honest here, and I might get a little hand slap for this, but that's okay. We don't need that access because we're not getting into your tenants all the time. And if you call us for support and you need help, we're going to be like, hey, we don't have delegated admin. Click this link. You're going to click it. We're going to fix your problem, and then you can go remove it. It's absolutely an option.
Dom, you bring up a point because I kind of asked you, well, are we using PAM for that access? There's actually a different method to use too, right? Because what am I doing when I'm spearfishing? I'm sending an email to Ryan Cromar, chicken wing connoisseur of the South, or the North. I apologize. Canadians are north of us, as I understand it, right? And so Ryan Cromar, I'm going to send him an email, and then he's going to use that email in that same browser frame, in that same signed-in session, and he's going to go elicit that and get access to Ryan Cromar. Well, Ryan Cromar doesn't have access to the Partner Center. Even through PAM, he doesn't. It's a completely separate identity. Most MSPs are not willing to spend that $20 separately for another license, for another user. At Iconic, we did, right? We absolutely had separate admin accounts that were different than our actual accounts, so that you would not be able to just email them. We didn't even accept outside email from those admin accounts where possible. Right. And so, you start looking at other ways. And I think that's the great point here is there's no one silver bullet. Right. I know a guy likes to say that, Ken Patterson. There's no one silver bullet in cybersecurity either. It's about showing that you've done the work to protect yourself. Right. And that you've done the work to say, OK, how would I attack me? There's some great walkthroughs. There's a company called MITRE that does, attack surface research. They have a framework that allows you to research these threat actors. And they even have simulation kits. And if you're technically savvy enough, you can actually walk through their attack methods and see how it fares in your environment through some of these different simulation kits of these APTs. So, but it is about defensibility and showing actions and just getting better over time. As Alan says, and I love Alan Miller. He's been on our calls for a year and a half, 2 years together. Says it's not I do not want to have access. It's not I do not want to have access. It's I do want to not have access. I love it. Yeah, 100%. Right. I definitely do want to not have access. 100%. If I can do that, and moreover, if I can only have that access when I have to have that access through PAM, I'm even better off, right? And it'd be even cooler to combine my administrative account with PAM as well, so that now I have to actually escalate my administrator that's designated to be escalated, even though the other one cannot escalate. Right?
That's another one. Yeah. I think we probably mentioned the point, but we maybe tiptoed around it, is you are not to be an admin of your MSP's tenant on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Because if I set up PAM, but I'm an admin and I get phished, I'm just going to go turn off PAM. You know what I mean? And so you think about all these different layers.
Yeah. It's like a no-brainer, but yes, it should certainly be mentioned, right? Like that's absolute.
Right.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you guys are talking about this. One of the things we hear all the time from partners, at least in the field side of the house, is the delegate access privileges or admin privileges and why Pax8 needs it. And you just hit the nail on the head, Dom, is that you don't necessarily need it on all the time, but you're going to receive, or it's going to be harder to support you. But you also need to be very diligent about what's on and what's not on. Hearing the horror stories of, hey, we had a customer 2 years ago and I'm still seeing this stuff, like, that's scary. And it's a good thing that we're now kind of showing partners and folks like how to drink their own champagne, right? Like you kind of need to practice what you preach. And this is a great example of that.
I would not recommend drinking your own champagne when you've been upgraded to first on a 4 a.m. flight. Yeah. It makes for a very rough beginning of the day. Just speaking from a friend, at least.
Yeah. You asked for OJ, they brought you mimosa, right? So.
Yeah, it was an accident. But anyways, I think we've kind of beat this to death. Dom, if you want to close us out.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Please feel free to drop comments on either of our broadcasts, and we will do whatever we can to get them answered as soon as possible. Thanks for listening to us yap about this. It's a very important issue. And please, pay attention to the guidance that Microsoft puts out, I think is one of my biggest takeaways. Anyone else have any takeaways before we shut this down?
No, I mean, I think, we've got a couple people poking a little bit in the comments, but the conversation is, well, why should a CSP have access? Why should an MSP have access? Why should I think they should all be taken in business consideration, the impact of business consideration, and what controls you've placed to try to protect that, right? Does the CSP have delegated admin? Yes. Some account, some system, some controlled process, some access methodology to get access to that and use it. And I think the point is as long as you can tell a very detailed story around those protections and how you're using them, and look at it with a bit of a grain of salt and saying, should we? Should I? Is it needed, right? I think Alan Miller hit it really well, is I do want to not have access. You should approach things with, if I don't need it, the minimum set of permissions should be what we use. And if you do need more than that, then it should be something you escalate as needed and have defensibility around how next year you even have a better process than last year around that same thing. And maybe next week, right, as we start seeing the iteration of these attack surfaces. So great point, great conversations, and thanks for having me on, Dom.
Yep, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
And I didn't know I was going to be with the chicken wing connoisseur, like CWC in the flesh.
Yeah. I needed something, man. I don't have the pedigree that you two gents do. I can't thank you enough for having me here today. Just kind of be a sponge as part of this. So look forward
We're all students, Cromar. We're all students.
Learning always. So much appreciate, guys. And big shout out to everybody for jumping in and asking questions and stuff. Thanks for that.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.